Welcome to China Insider. I'm your host, Bowen Xiao. Today we will discuss U.S. China relations. On August 4, President Trump said in an interview with Fox Business that relations with China are badly hurt and that he used to have a great relationship with Xi, but not anymore. It's now becoming more clear to the world that the Chinese Communist Party is a major threat.
Well, it's been very badly hurt by what happened because I really believe they could have stopped it in Wuhan, and I feel strongly about that. And it's certainly been very badly hurt.
The Western alliance is starting to fight back. The roles of two people are distinct in this. One is Xi Jinping, the dictator for life in China, and the other is Mike Pompeo, the chief unifier. Pompeo has served as Secretary of State in the Trump administration for more than 2 years now. He graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point and later received a doctorate degree in law from Harvard University. He also has a background in law and business. On January 23, 2017, Pompeo took over as director of the Central Intelligence Agency after being nominated by Trump. A year later, on April 26, Pompeo became Secretary of State. As the Secretary of State, he kept close ties with the U.S. allies and partners, uniting them to stand against the Chinese Communist Party. Even as the CCP virus was raging, he still visited Britain, Denmark, and Israel. After a year of hard work, Pompeo's efforts finally paid off. A new alliance of democracies was formed. Pompeo reinforces alliances with the US and unifies countries' understanding of the CCP. On July 30, he said at a Senate hearing that because of China's economic strength, there were certain difficulties in forming the alliance of democracies.
Most importantly, on China, we see the Chinese Communist Party also for what it is, the central threat of our times. Our vigorous diplomacy has helped lead an international awakening to the threat of the CCP.
On July 31st, the CCP issued arrest warrants for 6 Hong Kong pro-democracy activists who had fled overseas. On that same day, Germany announced the cancellation of its extradition treaty with Hong Kong. Before that, Britain, the United States, and Canada had all suspended their extradition treaties with Hong Kong. Also on that day, Foreign Minister of the European Union, Joseph Borrell, said in a statement that the Chinese Communist Party has become more assertive, some even say aggressive, and has undoubtedly become more powerful, but also somewhat friendless, and that the European Union will work with the international community to become the center of cooperation efforts. On August 2nd, the head of the Department of Foreign Affairs of Switzerland, Ignazio Cassis, also indicated that the CCP's human rights violations are on the increase, and that we are seeing China stray from the path of openness. He emphasized that if China sticks to its new course, the Western world will react more decisively. On August 3rd, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of France declared to suspend the extradition treaty with Hong Kong. On August 4th, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo posted on Twitter saying that the United States condemns the Chinese Communist Party's attempt to prosecute pro-democracy advocates outside of China, including in the United States. We stand on the side of freedom. He also made a statement that the United States and other free nations will continue to protect our peoples from the long arm of Beijing's authoritarianism. Today we have on the show Frank Gaffney, who was the former Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Policy during the Reagan administration back in the 1980s. Now Frank serves as Vice Chairman of the Committee on the Present Danger, China. He is also the founder and president of the Center for Security Policy, a Washington-based think tank. Hi Frank, so good to have you on the show.
It's good to be with you. Thank you very much for having me on.
So we know that China is such an important topic right now with all that is happening. How does the current US approach when it comes to China differ from previous administrations? What is the end goal of this new US strategy?
The famous American humorist Mark Twain used to say it's like the difference between lightning and lightning bugs. It's all the difference in the world. The president under this administration, as opposed to all of his counterparts, has, I think, been very clear-eyed about the nature of the Chinese Communist Party, the warfare that it's waging against us. It's called unrestricted warfare in the Chinese Communist Party's playbook. And he has actually taken steps to push back. to counter these various attacks and to punish the Chinese Communist Party for engaging in them against us. And every previous administration just kind of looked the other way, or in some instances actually fostered the kinds of behavior that the Chinese have been engaged in under the CCP. And so I think this is a very welcome development. And as to what its end goal is, I personally believe there can't be any end state that will actually make a difference other than the end of the Chinese Communist Party.
The tide is also turning against Huawei as countries are only allowing trusted vendors in their 5G networks, according to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, as the United States appears to see success with its new Clean Network program, which a number of European countries have signed off on. What kind of message has Pompeo's and the government approach as a whole sent to China? In your opinion, is this unprecedented?
I think the important thing to understand is it's not just been Secretary of State Mike Pompeo who has been sending a very important message to Beijing. It's the National Security Advisor to the President, Robert O'Brien. It's the Director of the FBI, Christopher Wray. It's the Attorney General of the United States, William Barr, and, of course, Vice President Pence, and most especially President Trump himself, all of whom have been communicating very powerfully, and particularly of late, a very simple but very important message. The Chinese Communist Party is our enemy. That's my word, not theirs necessarily, but it's been very much the thrust of what they've been saying. And I think that's got to be shaking up Beijing. The Chinese Communist Party itself has never heard that kind of rhetoric coming from American government officials, not since Nixon's day at least. And I think that this is going to be defining, hopefully, for our relationship with China, as long as it is misruled by the CCP, but also with respect to the coming election. Because I think that really is going to be the choice, the single most important choice, arguably, the American people will have to make. Do they want to have business as usual? Do they want to have us as a nation continue to strengthen, enable, embolden, and otherwise empower this time's existential threat to freedom?
Thank you, Frank. So good to have you on the show. Xi Jinping's aggressive actions actually helped Pompeo persuade many countries to support the United States. India is one example. The Indo-Pacific strategy was introduced as soon as President Trump took office. This strategy aims to enhance India's international status in order to counter the CCP. But India did not want to offend Beijing at the time, so it adopted the tactic of pleasing both sides. Not long ago, however, the People's Liberation Army ambushed Indian soldiers along the border. A small stone wall broke out between the two sides. This incident formed anti-communist sentiment among the Indian people, and the situation soon took a major turn. Indians used to lack cheap Chinese products, but now they have issued a nationwide boycott. Japan is also responding more to Beijing's aggressions. On August 4th, Japan Minister of Foreign Affairs Taro Kono stated that the SDF will act firmly when necessary, while joining hands with the Japan Coast Guard to take action when necessary in response to the frequent activities of the CCP's coastal police ships on the Diaoyu Islands. Not long ago, it was said that Japan was reportedly preparing to join the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance as well. A similar situation occurred in the South China Sea. The CCP pushed its 9-dash line from its national boundary to the front door of countries in the South China Sea. The CCP used military force to occupy multiple islands and reefs and expanded its military bases. These aggressive actions made countries in the South China Sea, including Vietnam, the Philippines, and Indonesia, feel uneasy. These countries also joined the Alliance of Democracies initiated by the United States. Apart from these actions, Beijing's cover-up of the CCP's virus epidemic also angered the world. Instead of reflecting on the handling of the epidemic, Beijing adopted wolf warrior diplomacy, asking the world to thank the CCP and at the same time shifting the blame to the US, accusing the US military of spreading the virus. Beijing also imposed the national security law in Hong Kong, breaking the international agreement signed with the United Kingdom and abolishing the policy of one country, two systems. This approach not only brought to light the CCP's rogue nature, it also caused many countries to suffer, to varying degrees, losses in investments in Hong Kong. So Beijing's newly imposed national security law in Hong Kong has brought to light the CCP's rogue nature, causing many countries to suffer, to varying degrees, losses in investments in Hong Kong. So what is the trajectory of China's increasingly aggressive policy under Chinese leader Xi Jinping versus the trajectory of America's approach of unity with its formation of new alliances?
The Chinese Communist Party under Xi Jinping has made no secret of their ambitions to rule the world. And they are doing so ever more aggressively, I believe, in their own right, and to some extent in league with some of the other dangerous enemies of freedom around the world, notably the Russians, the Iranians, and the North Koreans, of course. Our approach is very different. We seek to preserve a world in which freedom is both respected and protected, and to do that with other nations who are similarly convinced that that is the best form for human, growth, prosperity, and happiness. And I believe that increasingly nations around the world, including many who have been to varying degrees seduced by the Chinese Communist Party, particularly with its debt trap diplomacy in the form of what's called the Belt and Road Initiative, who have been tempted to play ball with the Chinese, go along with their program, have them build infrastructure and the like. And they are, I think, these countries now increasingly recognizing that's actually disastrous for them. And as a result, there's a better than, certainly in recent months, improved chance that we will be able to make common cause with much of the rest of the world against the Chinese Communist Party.
Recently, the global community is increasing its pressure against Beijing, in part due to U.S. efforts on this front to educate other countries about the threat posed by the CCP. What can we expect to see from China? Will they continue to violate international law?
The Chinese Communist Party inherently is what I think we are going to designate it as a transnational criminal organization. That is to say, it is engaged in crimes against humanity on an epic scale against its own people over decades now. And of course, it has conducted innumerable illegal activities elsewhere around the world as well, some of which have been highly detrimental to this country, but also to many others. And I don't see any prospect of the Chinese Communist Party changing its spots, ceasing to be a transnational criminal organization, ceasing to be a threat to the world, bent on dominating it and forcing the rest of us to be enslaved by it. So as long as the Chinese Communist Party is ruling in China and able to wield the resources of that country and employ them to its benefit and everybody else's detriment, I think we're going to continue to have the CCP as a mortal enemy of both the United States and an inveterate threat to freedom for everybody else.
And in light of what that has happened with China's botched handling of the CCP virus and its aggressive policies, how significant is this international awakening against China?
I think it remains to be seen. The Chinese Communist Party has, I believe, through the unleashing deliberately of this CCP virus on the entire planet, as my friend Gordon Chang likes to say, never before in history has a single nation attacked the entire rest of the world simultaneously. But by so doing, I think the Chinese Communist Party has really shaken the perceptions of that government, and particularly the idea in many countries around the world that we can just do business with China, that we can help make it richer, we can help make it stronger, and it won't be a problem for us. If anything, we'll benefit from trade and economic growth as well. I think this disease and its horrific consequences have caused many nations, especially some of those that have been subjected to the seduction of the Chinese Communist Party through the Belt and Road Initiative, to rethink the advisability of becoming essentially a new vassal state of Beijing and the party that rules it. If that's so, and the United States continues to exert the kind of leadership it has of late under Donald Trump, I think this will prove to be a tipping point, both with respect to the ambitions of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, its General Secretary especially, and in terms of the future fate of our own people and those of others currently in China's crosshairs.
Thank you for coming on the show today, Frank. I really appreciate you going into more detail about the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party and what kind of strategy they are using.
I appreciate the chance to talk with you and share with you and your audience the work of our Committee on the Present Danger, China.
Judging from the practices of Xi's regime and from Pompeo's efforts, it seems that an interactive form of internal and external cooperation has been formed. As Xi's regime becomes more aggressive, its policies increasingly betray universal values. This can manifest in the loss of public support. At the same time, the international community continues to intensify its crackdown on the CCP, and a gigantic net is tightening. That's all for today. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.